Hey guys, I'm Woody, this is Piano Shack. So I got a question on the channel from Carl Taylor. He says, "Hi Woody, what happened to part 4 of the FA08 versus MOTIF comparison? I was looking forward to your conclusion." To which I replied, "No worries Carl, I just haven't gotten around to recording it yet." And even Blindfold Knobs has chimed in on this thread. He says, "Part 4, please sir." So in this episode I'll oblige and will also read out some more viewer comments on the topic.
Woody Piano Shack.
Okay, let's discuss the most important category on any keyboard, which is of course the acoustic piano. Right, the Yamaha does sound good, but it is not as satisfying and as realistic to play as the Roland, which has this fabulous supernatural sound engine. So it's actually emulating the sound of the piano instead of just replaying a static sample. And for that reason, the Roland is much more satisfying and dynamic to play. It just sounds more pleasing. And there are several different sort of characters of piano sound on the FA, and they all sound completely different. Whereas on the MOTIF, I thought they all sounded kind of samey with just sort of different effects really. So for the acoustic piano category, the FA wins hands down. Now then, the Rhodes is terrible on the MOTIF in my opinion. It always has been and it still is on the latest generation of the MOTIF. I haven't tried the Montage, but I'm assuming it's pretty bad as well. It's bad on my PSR as well, come to mention it. Now, the Roland does have this supernatural modelling again, so it's a physical model of a Rhodes. It simulates the characteristics and the physics of the instrument. It sounds fabulous. The problem with the MOTIF is these really nasty velocity switches. You play softly, you get one sound, you play hard and you get another sound, and there's a big glitch in between the two. It really is horrible to play. Having said that, it does sound pretty nice in a mix. So if you're playing sort of solo on it for your own enjoyment, not so good. But the MOTIF does sound quite good when used in a track in a mix. So there you go. What else will I say? Yeah, the Rhodes sound on the MOTIF tend to be drenched in reverb, and I believe they are drenched in reverb and other effects to cover up the fact that they aren't really very good samples. Whereas on the Roland you can listen to it dry and it sounds really, really good. Now then, for the Wurlitzer, you might think that the Roland would win again with the supernatural engine, but I found the sound of the FA to be a bit wimpy. On my Wurlitzer sounds, the electric piano, I like to have a lot of bite and drive and grit and punch and power. Didn't really deliver on the FA, I'm sorry. However, the Yamaha, even though it's just using samples, does sound quite gritty and punchy. So, in this category, the MOTIF gets the win. Now then, regarding the organ, well, they have completely different engines. The MOTIF is using samples, but they sound quite good and it's fun to play. The Roland, well, it's got this fabulous supernatural model. You can tweak the drawbars in real time, adjust the parameters of the Leslie and the organ, but it wasn't all that satisfying to play. And as I've mentioned before, it's a bit wimpy in the bass. There's not much left hand. And the rock sounds with the distortion are not so satisfying. So the MOTIF sounds better, the Roland is more tweakable, so I will give this one a tie. We then demonstrated the classical guitars, and for me this was a clear winner for the MOTIF. It sounds a lot more realistic and pleasing to play, with a lot more nuances of the string slides and the picking sounds and the mutes and stuff. The Roland attempts to do it with a supernatural engine, but it just sounds a little bit synthetic and boring to me. So MOTIF for the win. We also listened to some double bass and some electric bass. I'm not so sure which came out best here. They both sounded quite pleasing, but I think I would give the acoustic bass to the Roland. It was a little bit more realistic. Again, we have this supernatural engine, which is simulating string slaps and slides and mutes and different finger techniques. It sounded really, really good. The motif wasn't bad, but just a little bit more expressive on the Roland, I think. Electric bass, a bit hard to say. We didn't really dig into these too much. So we'll call that, I think we'll call this whole category a tie, actually. Now then, let's talk about the orchestral strings. And here there are dozens of orchestral string patches on both instruments. And I took the first one in the category for both of these, assuming that it would be the best. Actually, I'm not sure if that was the case, but anyway, I think the motif sounded a lot better. For the strings, the string section, the sort of violin, cello string section sounded much more pleasing and realistic on the motif, and a little bit synthetic and dry on the Roland. I think in general we can safely say that the motif excels for orchestral and acoustic sounds. Not acoustic piano, but all your saxophones, woodwinds, reed instruments, bowed instruments, they all sound quite a lot better to my old ears on the motif. So we'll give the motif a win in this category. Moving on to the synth strings then. These are your warm synth pads. Well, we have again the supernatural sound engine on the Roland with the physical modelling of the circuitry of analog synthesizers, and it sounds wonderful. It sounds to me so much better than the warm synth string sounds you get on the motif, which do sound good again in a mix, but by themselves they do sound a little bit clinical, a little bit static, a little bit sterile. Yes, they sound like you're playing samples, which is what you're doing. On the Roland, you're playing an emulation of the real machine, and Roland have done a lot of physical modeling in their Gaia synthesizers, in this new Era range, so they really are experts at emulating the circuitry of old synthesizers. So for the synth pads, for the synth strings, an easy winner here. It's the Roland FA. Now then, we also played some synth lead sounds, and I was really disappointed with the synth leads that we found on the motif. Jesper pulled up a few for me, but they just sounded wimpy and weak and didn't have any grunt or punch or power. Whereas on the FA, it's full with classic retro synth lead sounds, well, both retro and new sounds, and they have so much punch, power and presence. It's fabulous. They sound rich and thick, and they are awesome to play. On the motif, they're wimpy. So for me, a clear winner here is the Roland FA. Synth brass, well, you guessed it, the Roland FA does warmer, fatter, thicker synth brass sound than actually any other synthesizer I've ever played, including the motif. So we have a winner in this category for the Roland FA. We also played some D50 Bell Pad Sounds, and the D50 coming from Roland, you would expect it to be best on the FA. But the Yamaha motif that we were playing on, Jesper has loaded it with a D50 expansion pack. So actually the bell pad sound I was using was a sort of sample of some D50 partials, and it did sound really nice. I was enjoying it a lot. And again, each of these synthesizers has 100 bell pad sounds included, and we've just picked one to compare, so it's a bit of a meaningless comparison. Hard to give a winner in this one, so we'll call it a tie. We played some drum sounds on both instruments, and they had very, very different characteristics. It was hard to say which sounded best. And again, there are 20 or 30 different kits on each instrument, and we just sort of compared the first one assuming that that would be the best. They sounded different. I couldn't really say which sounded the best. We did like the jazz kit on the MOTIF a lot. Both of us were really grooving along on that one. Another aspect, of course, is that both of these instruments have built-in drum patterns and grooves as well. And here, the patterns on the FA are really, really rubbish compared to the fabulous patterns on the MOTIF. So let's give this category to the MOTIF, mainly for the rhythm patterns that are built in. So how do we conclude this? Well, both of them do sound good in their own way. And I'd say that none of them really sound bad. Neither of these synthesizers are bad in any category. Some say the Roland might be slightly better at the piano sounds, at the keyboard sounds. That's your synthesizer, electric piano, piano, maybe the organs. They sound better at that. A little bit better than the MOTIF. But the MOTIF, on the other hand, is a little bit better at all the other sounds. So it's a little bit of swings and roundabouts there. It depends what you're into. I would say if you're really into playing keyboard type sounds, then definitely check out the FA. But if you're more interested in orchestral sounds and score sounds and acoustic sounds and of course the arpeggiator stuff, then check out the MOTIF. But listen to both and you won't be disappointed with either. So that was, of course, just my opinion. I think we should balance this out by listening to some viewer feedback on my YouTube channel. So a comment from Ronald Barometer here 3 months ago. I cannot believe this is even a comparison. Yamaha hands down, hashtag, he says. Maybe the kids would say hashtag Yamaha hands down there, whatever. I'm going to read out a comment from Herbert here. You should consider a hearing test. I owned the XF for a few years and now have an FA, and trust me, you're right about one thing, there is no contest. We need to listen to this guy. He's owned an FX for many years. I have not liked Roland for years, but the FA is better across the board. The Yamaha sounds lifeless next to Roland. If you don't have both, then you don't know what you're talking about. I'm giving my Yamaha to my brother, gladly. What a nice guy, giving his synthesizer away to his brother. We have a message from Wilkos Basil. Just different personality. Both sound good. XF more low ends on some of the organs. Yes, I agree. Okay, from Handcrafted H4N. Oh, that's the same as my audio recorder, H4N D crafted 5 days ago. Hard to compare when the Yam piano is drenched in reverb. You know, you're totally right. This was one of the failures of this comparison, actually. I did disable the reverb on most of the patches on my Roland because I knew how to do that. On the Yamaha, I wasn't familiar with it, and unfortunately, Jesper didn't disable the reverb, so we weren't really doing a very fair comparison. So Toho Central has commented. He writes lots of comments on my videos. Thanks a lot. Roland, he says, because they have modelled supernatural sounds that can be heavily edited, not samples like Yamaha's had for years. Roland's PCM samples sound better too. Yes, I think I'm inclined to agree with you, Toho Central. We have a message from 30 Shades of Grey, who writes, what equipment do you have above the keyboards? I'm interested in making music and I want to know how experts like you do it. Thank you so much for the great videos. Keep it up. Now, I printed this one out thinking, okay, I can talk about my digital recorder, but I think he's talking about the equipment that Jesper had. We recorded this in Jesper's house and he had some kind of, what was it? Some Swedish, what do they call them? An electron, some kind of electron synthesizer or sequencer above the keyboard. Not sure what it is. If you're watching this, Jesper, please chime in and let me know what it was there. And if you're talking about my gear, well, I record all my audio onto a Zoom H4N digital recorder. So straight out of the synthesizer, straight into my digital recorder. over to the computer, I add it to the video and upload to YouTube. Oh, don't know how to pronounce this. Can I call you Joe? Joe Santos? Sorry, man. I know that's wrong. Okay, here we have another guy that has both of these. I have both Roland FA and a MOXF. Same sound font and engine as the MOTIF XF. Exactly. The MOXF and the MOTIF XF have exactly the same sounds. Piano Rhodes are far better in Roland. That's because it's supernatural engine. Yep. Orchestra and strings sound 1+ for Roland. Okay, so he's preferring the orchestral and string sounds of the Roland, which goes against what I was saying, but you know, just my opinion. Everybody's got one. Guitars, basses, synth sounds, and other bread and butter sounds, Yamaha wins by a large amount. Its insert effects and other capabilities are almost endless. Yep, I agree. Yamaha, colourful sound good in almost every PA record without big tweaking. Yes, that's very true. And that's the reason most pro bands have a MOTIF in their rig or in the studio, because it simply sounds good without you having to do very much. Roland, more natural sound, real sound, no bling bling, and very dry sounds. Yes, you don't need so many effects with the Roland because the raw sound is pretty good. Okay, a comment from Z Bazu, thank you. He says, Yamaha wins the synth. Oh, question mark. Come on, man. FA has much superior and tweakable SN synth engine ported over from Integra. It beats the MOXF static synth sounds with its hands tied. This is a common thread in the comments, actually. Thank you for the comment, Zibazu. And that's it. And I think that will wrap up my shootout of the MOTIF versus the Roland. I do thank you all for watching, and I thank you for all of the comments. I enjoyed reading them, and I enjoyed the debate, both on YouTube and on the Facebook group for the Roland FA, where there was quite a lively conversation also about this topic. Thanks for watching this video, and I will see you again really soon. Cheerio!
Woody Piano Shack.